Before we start this video, a large thank you to Mustafa, Quentin, Taylor, Chris, and Joshua for their support on Patreon. I hope you guys enjoy the video. Alright, hello guys. Today we're going to finish our poison system. We're going to add a UI bar that makes us track how much poison buildup and how much poison amount we have, and we're going to make a cure for the poison. So let's go to the player UI, go to 2D mode, double click it, and I'm just going to duplicate the health bar here. I'm going to paste it just anywhere under the HUD window. So paste as child. And I'm going to rename this to poison buildup bar. Now, we actually use basically the same script logic across the health bar and stamina bar and aura bar, but we have different script names. So I'm just going to make an empty game object here called stat bars. So I'm going to drag all the bars into there just to keep the UI a little bit more organized. And I'm going to right click on this prefab and unpack it completely, because if I don't do that, I can't drag these game objects under this empty. So what I was saying is basically, if you guys want, you could essentially make one class and just have it as a general class for all the stat bars, and just have the functions change the max amount and the min amount. But I'm going to keep the naming convention system we have here now and make a new script for this poison buildup bar, just so we can call it by its actual name. And again, just to keep the naming conventions similar. So I'm just going to drag this bar here into the middle of the screen down here, as is in Dark Souls. And I'm going to resize it a little bit to fit there. And I'm just going to change everything that's health to poison. And I'm going to change the color to a lighter purple. I believe in Dark Souls, when you start getting build up, it's a lighter purple. And then when you actually get poison, it turns to a darker purple. Now again, feel free to customize this all you guys want. I'm just going by Souls because I feel like it's the guide we all know, and that's why you watch the series. But feel free to put this anywhere on the screen, change the color, change the effects, just do what you want to do. So as you can see, the health bar logic here is, again, pretty close to what we're going to be using for this poison buildup bar. So I'm just going to make a poison buildup bar script. I'm going to change the logic a little bit, because the poison buildup bar will not behave exactly the same as the regular health bar UI. So I'm going to copy all this code here and paste it in here, but we're going to change some things. Start off by hitting my namespace. Mine is SG. Put my namespace up here, erase the start and update functionality as is per tradition. And I'm going to copy all of the logic in the health bar script and paste it here. And I'm going to change a couple things. So first off, we need to call it using uniengine.ui, or else we can't use the slider component. So let's do that. Okay, so we actually don't need to set a max poison buildup value. So I'm just renaming this. I don't know why I'm doing this, because we're just going to actually say set slider.max value equals 100. Basically because we're going to treat this like a percentage, and we're going to call this on start, because at any given time the maximum poison buildup percentage will be 100. So we're going to treat it like that. So we don't need to set that anymore besides start, because it's static. It's never going to change. The max poison buildup percentage will never ever change. So let's make the slider value.0 on start, and then we're going to change current health to current poison buildup, and we'll change the slider of this function. So basically, all that's different is we're calling the max value and the minimum value here, or the starting value on start. And then we're going to say game object that set active equals false, because this bar will not appear until we are experiencing some poison buildup. Okay, so on the player effects manager now, we're actually going to override two of our poison functions on the character effects manager. So let's start by saying protected override. And we're going to start by saying handle poison buildup. So we'll then call protected override, and then we're going to handle the is poison effect. So these functions are going to be exactly the same. We're going to call the base functionality, except we're actually going to update the UI components for the player manager, or the player version of it, as is pretty much the theme of all the player version of the scripts. We have some UI components to edit. So we'll say poison buildup bar of type poison buildup bar. We're going to call it on awake. Poison buildup bar equals find object of type. It's important that you make sure you set the game object as inactive on the start and not the awake method, or else you won't be able to find the script here on this awake method. Oh, not poison buildup bar. Basically, on the poison buildup bar script, make sure you're setting the game object as inactive on the start function, not the awake function, or else we won't be able to get that variable here on this awake function. So on the handle poison buildup function, we're going to say if poison buildup is less than or equal to 0, poison buildup bar game object set active false. And then we're going to say else. We're going to say poison buildup bar game object set active is true. So basically, if we don't have any poison buildup, we want to remove this game object from the screen. Oh, whoops, I put true there. It's supposed to be false. And if we do have poison buildup, we want to enable this game object to play on the screen. Very simple. Now, for the is poison effect, it's going to be pretty similar. We need to make another effects bar for that though. But before we do that, we're also going to say poison buildup bar dot set. It's called set current health. We're going to change that in a second. Set poison buildup, and we're going to say mathf dot round to int because I believe we stored as a float. And then we're going to say poison buildup. And we're going to right click on this, rename to set poison build up amount. Okay, looks good. Now if I go into the game here, as you can see, we still collide with this weird little hemisphere thing. And a nice commenter in the comment section actually told me that he thinks it's our fall system. Okay, so over here on the player locomotion manager, where we have ignore for ground check, I don't know why I call it that. Let's just rename this to ground layer, because this is just anything our ground detection system detects as the ground. So any layer on this we will actually detect as ground. Make sure you set it to public. It was private to the prior of this recording. And I believe we declare that on start with some very strange syntax. But the problem with that is we can never edit it on the fly. So let's just erase the start declaration here and set it up in the inspector, as it is much easier. So we save that, we go to the inspector here now, and we go over to the player locomotion manager, and you can see the ground layer will now have a drop menu. Let's just select default. That means anything with the default layer we will detect as the ground. So we change this particle effects, the poison surface trigger, to say water or anything but default. If we start the video now, start the game, we should not collide with it anymore. Yep, and there we go. And as you can see, we have a poison buildup bar that actually goes up to full now. And I don't know if you noticed right now, but I have some particle effects on the character I was testing earlier. This is going to be the poison effect that will trigger when we are poisoned. So let's set that up. But first, let's go set up the poison amount stat bar. And I'm just going to increase the poison damage amount from 1 to say 15 so I can see it more proactively on the screen. And I think that is fine for that. Let's go to 2D, go back to the player UI, and we can actually duplicate our poison amount bar down here now, or poison buildup bar rather, and we're going to call this poison amount bar because this will be the amount of poison you have to run through your system before the poison wears off. I'm going to change this to a darker purple, as is the same in Souls, I do believe, in Dark Souls 3. I'm going to change it to poison amount bar instead of poison buildup bar. And I'm going to keep it in the exact same position as the poison buildup bar, so it looks like the bars are just transitioning. I'm going to remove the health bar script from both of these bars. Kind of forgot that was left on there. And if we open up the poison buildup bar script again, we're actually going to use, again, a very similar logic, so we can copy all of this. But to keep the naming conventions the same, I'm actually going to make a separate script for it. I'm going to call it poison amount bar. And let's open that up. Let us again make our namespace and erase the start and update function as is per tradition. I think we're going to use the start function though. Let me just think. So let's paste all this in here. Copy that. There we go. Okay, so we need to call upon using UnityEngine.ui, or else we won't be able to use the slider function again. All right, so let's think. What do we have to do for this? Okay, so we're going to change this to set poison amount. And we're going to change the variable name to poison amount. And that's pretty straightforward. Okay, on start we want to set the game object as false. That's still the same. The max value is 100, and the value would be 100 as well, actually. So that's fine as it is. I think that's the only difference we have right now. So now on the player effects manager, let's call upon the poison amount bar, and let's call this poison amount bar. Again, on the awake method, we'll say poison amount bar equals find object of type poison amount bar. Okay, that looks good. Now I think that's fine right there. And we're gonna have to actually call the bar awake on the handle is poison effect. So we will say if is poison is false. So if we're not poisoned, we're going to set the bar as inactive. So poison amount bar dot game object dot set active equals false. Else we're going to set the bar to active. So poison amount bar dot game object dot set active equals true. All right, there's still a few more things we have to do in terms of little touch-ups. We actually have to update the bar's status as well. So right below here we'll say poison amount bar dot set poison amount, and then we're just going to pass the mathf dot round to int our poison amount, because I believe again we store that as a float. I could be mistaken. I'm just going off of what I had in the prototype project. So let's save that. I'm going to remove the poison build-up bar from the poison amount bar game object, and I'm going to add the poison amount bar script to it instead. I'm going to drag in the bar here, the slider. I don't think it's necessary. I believe I called that in the awake. Okay, so if I go over to the player or character effects manager script here now, I'm going to make a public game object for default poison particles effects and a private game object for current poison particle effects. And the reason why we're making two is because we want one we're going to instantiate from every time and one we can destroy afterwards. So basically the default one will be the one we always instantiate from. It's the particle effect that we always just place on the character. And the current one is the active particle effect in the game that we can destroy when we're no longer poisoned. So we're going to go to handle poison buildup right here, and we're going to say if buildup transformed is not equal null. We don't have this yet, don't worry. This is where we're going to spawn the particle effects. We're going to say current particle effects equal instantiate default particle or default poison particle effects. And then we're going to say on the transform of buildup transform dot transform. We don't have that made yet, but we're going to do that momentarily. Now, if we don't have a buildup transform for whatever reason, this is just a failsafe. We're just going to instantiate the particle effects at the position of the stats manager, the character stats manager. So that will just basically appear at the feet of the character, I do believe. And we'll just say, I was going to use a lock-on transform, but I don't believe we have that as a public variable there. So we'll say character stats manager dot transform. Now, let's actually make this momentarily, but first we're down here, and we're going to say if poison is equal to false, basically when we become unpoisoned, we're going to say destroy current particle or current poison particle effects, so they're no longer on your character. Now, let's make this variable up here. So I'm going to make this just under the poison category. We'll make a public transform, and I'm just going to call it build-up transform, because we can use this for future build-up effects too if you'd like, such as if you want to add curse to your game or something else along those lines. Now, I'm just going to say the location of build-up particle effects, or the location build-up particle effects will spawn. Now, if we go to our player, let's actually make a transform or use one we already have. For example, as I said before, I believe the lock-on transform is pretty much in the center of the chest of the character. So if you wanted to, if you want to spawn them right there, that is, you could use that, or you can make a new transform. But whichever one you decide to use, just go to the player effects manager and drag it down in there, like so. Okay, so now get your poison effect that you want to instantiate around the player when they are poisoned. And I'm just going to drag it here. Make sure you drag it into the default poison effects variable right there. That is perfect. Now we should be able to walk in and get poison, and the bar should appear as well. So let's walk in here. You can see the poison buildup bar is working. When it gets to 100%, boom, we become poisoned, and now the poison bar slowly starts to decrease, and we take health damage, and the poison particle effects instantiate on our player and give us that little purple looking effect, and that's really cool. Okay, excellent. So this is all working just as it is intended to. Now let's make a way to cure our poison. So if I right-click and create, I'm going to create a C# script, and I'm just going to call this clump consumable item. And I'm going to just call this clump consumable item because we can kind of net these all together from the same script. Basically, we can make one that cures everything, but it will all come from the same base class. So namespace SG, and I'm going to make this derived from a consumable item class. And basically, we just make a check, much like with the Estus flask. We'll say, is it poison clump, or is it a blooming blood clump, or is it a frost clump, whichever one you wanna choose. And then depending on which bool is checked, it will perform some logic. So if we go to the flask here, the flask item script, we can actually copy a lot of this logic because some of it is similar, and we'll just edit it. So I'm gonna copy up to here and paste it. Now, so we're not going to use any health recovery obviously for this one, so let's erase that. And we can right click on recovery effects and just change this to clump consume effects. So what happens when you consume the clump. And then the instantiated effects model, we have that called flask right now. Let's rename that to clump. And everything else looks like it's actually going to be useful. So we need to add some logic to those. So let's make a header. I'm going to call this the cure effects. So which effect does it cure? Public bool. This one's going to cure poison. So let's just make a cure poison. And then right below here, when we instantiate the model, we can say if cure poison. And we can do some stuff here. We can say player effects manager dot poison amount is equal to 0. And this is an error here, guys. I'm actually supposed to put that to default poison amount, but I will fix that in a second. But if you guys want to do that right now, go ahead. Then we'll say player effects manager dot poison buildup is equal to 0. And then we'll say player effects manager dot is poison is equal to false. And that will effectively cure our character of poison. And now if you wanted to in the future, you could just even make some more effects. You could use a couple more of the statements here. Make it for like cure bleed or cure frost buildup or whatever you'd like. Let's create an asset menu up here and let's make it cure effect clump. You can see what I mean here, because you can just add more of these checks here in the future. You can even make a clump that cured everything if you'd like. There we go. Okay, it looks good. Now let's go and check and see what's going on here. Alright, so I'm going to go wherever the Estus Flask is, and I'm going to make a new item in the same folder. Items, consumables, cure effect clump. I'm just going to call this purple moss clump because that's the one in Dark Souls 3 that cures your poison. And I am going to quickly create a little 3D circle and make it purple so it has a little effect. So let's make a sphere here. Going to make that 1/10 its size. That should be perfectly fine. And then I will quickly make a material down here for it. Let's make it purple. So if I go to create, go down here to material, where are you? Oh, there you are. And then I will just call this purple moss clump. And then I'll make the color a darker purple. There we go, like that. Now I will double click the sphere to zoom in, drag the material on top of it, and then I will rename the sphere to purple moss clump. And then I'll drag that in and create a prefab of that and delete it from the scene. Now in the purple moss clump, the game or the item here, I will drag in the game object model onto the item model variable. I'll make the max amount 10. The current item amount should be 10 as well. Okay, and the item name I'm going to call it obviously purple moss clump. And the consuming animation I'm going to use drink, same one as the Estus Flask. I think the drink animation has an animation event that basically reloads our weapon because we unload it to drink the Estus Flask. So if you do use a different animation, make sure you add that animation event to that animation. Refer to the Estus Flask video if you don't know what I'm talking about. So let's just call this drink, and we're going to check cure poison here, and we're not going to check is interacting because we want to be able to move while we're doing this. Okay, now I'm going to go to the player inventory. I'm actually going to make sure we have our purple moss clump equipped on our current consumable. Going to make current item amount 10 for purple moss clump. And let's go over to the clump consumable here. The poison amount is 100, but let's go to the default poison amount here and the character effects manager. That should be 100 because this is basically the default poison percentage. So let's make that 100, and you're probably going to have to change that in the inspector on the player. It might still be at 0. Yes, it is still at 0 for me here. So we're going to change that to, we'll get a play mode. Change that to 100. And then what we can do, we can go to the clump consumable script here. We can say if player effects manager dot current poison particle effects, and we need to make this to public because we're checking to see if this is actually not null, because then we want to destroy it. So let's switch this to public now. So if there's an active current poison particle effect around our player after we've eaten the purple moss clump, we want to actually destroy that effect. So if it does not equal null, let's destroy it. We'll just simply say destroy player effects manager dot current poison particle effect, and that will stop that purple cloud from spawning around our player after we've eaten the clump. And now lastly, let's go to the player effects manager dot poison amount equals player effects manager dot default poison amount. This will just reset the poison amount to 100% again for the next time that you get poisoned. Otherwise, when you get poisoned, it'll go back to 0, and then you won't be poisoned at all. So if we go into the game now, we can see the poison bullet works fine. We actually become poisoned. Our health goes down. The poison amount slowly decreases. If we eat the clump, boom. We lose the poison buildup. We lose the poison, and we lose the little poison particle effect. If we get poisoned again, boom, our poison goes back to 100%, and then we can eat the clump and do the same thing again and reset it all. So I hope you guys did enjoy this video. If you did, please do not forget to drop a like, leave a comment. It does genuinely help my series out so much. And if you're feeling like a super champion, check out my Patreon below. And as always, a large thank you to my Patreon supporters. It's because of you guys I get to make these cool videos. So I will see you guys in the next video.